Hunters, listen up! We have sightings of a new Elder Dragon in the Hoarfrost Reach!
Actually, sir, that's a brute wyvern.
But I can't classify it.
What? Sir, I just told you, it's a brute.
Yes, Cotton, but I can't classify it! Though I can't classify many things these days.
Do you need glasses, sir?
Yes, I do think that would be a good idea.
Well, don't you worry about those glasses just yet, Commander, because I can guarantee you that every monster today is already classified as an Elder Dragon. But do all Elder Dragons deserve to hold that title? No. As the most powerful officially recognized monster classification, Elder Dragons are some of the most consistently awe-inspiring monsters in the series, but sometimes the only awe they inspire for me is the aww I exhale when I start one of their quests. So today I present to you the top 5 worst Elder Dragons in Monster Hunter. Now before I get too deep into it, a little disclaimer. This list was incredibly difficult to make for me. I don't think there is a single Elder Dragon as a whole that I would actually describe as bad. However, worst is always relative, and the only way to make the worst monsters better is to talk about what makes them questionable in the first place. With that said, and without further ado then, let's begin with
Number 5, Kulve Taroth.
Alright, let's just stay nice and calm, everyone. There are a million things that make a monster, from their lore to their physical design, their moveset to their general behavior. Unfortunately, a monster, especially an Elder Dragon, can absolutely blow it out of the park in some of those areas, but still be a letdown in enough others to make it onto this list. Kulve Taroth is exactly that. As an actual monster in the lore, Kulve is absolutely fantastic. Her ecological niche is amazing. As far as visual design, she is incredibly striking, especially when she starts to enrage and starts melting gold all over the place. It looks awesome. Where Kulve goes wrong, actually, is arguably not her fault at all, but instead the fault of Capcom.
We have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived.
To put this into perspective, from Area 2 onwards, I absolutely adore this fight every time I am there. Unfortunately, though, I have been there a few hundred times in the last year at this point, and the experience that surrounds the good parts of the fight are what drag it down to number 5 on this list. So I guess let's start from the small and work our way up to the bigger overarching issues here. First off being Area 1. The first time you do this quest, following Kulve around the cavern while she barely attacks you, dropping rocks on her head, maybe even shooting some cannons once in a while, it can be sort of neat.
Open the gate!
And yes, it helps set up the rest of the fight, but it is hard to argue that on its own, this opening phase of the fight is anything better than
Close the gate!
But again, on its own, this section is only It isn't some great crime against the player base.
Open the gate a little.
That comes from the combination of the pursuit system and relic weapons. Okay, so let me start this off right by saying I know what a grind is, and I know that this is a grind, but a grind can be done so much better than this. The pursuit system then rewards you for picking up tracks and such by making Kulve Taroth easier to damage in subsequent hunts. The intentions behind this were obviously to make it feel like the monster is so powerful that a full hunt isn't enough for even a group of the best hunters in Astera to topple it in one go. The result is that every Kulve Taroth quest completion is preceded by a ton of unnecessary failures, and even more than that, the community at large has adopted the tactic of a track run, which is the most efficient way to do it, which is when you use your first pursuit level quest of a Kulve Taroth siege to exclusively pick up footprints, and again, if you had to do it once, it would still just be sort of So this all comes back to the grind of the relic system at the end of the day. Lore-wise, it's great. There's weapons all inside of her crazy metal existence, but mechanically speaking, this system was attached to the wrong monster. Doing the Kulve Taroth siege this many times in a row has done nothing but tarnished my memory of her fight. Tracking quests become less and less enjoyable, and Area 1 starts to feel like a side quest you don't really care about. If the original story version of the quest, the one that you do for the first time as far as the actual lore goes, was the version that we see today, and then the one that you repeated for the relic weapon grind was simply a pursuit level 4 Kulve starting in Area 2, so you properly fought her until you just won and then moved on, that would be fantastic to me. But as it stands, that isn't what is in the game. So unfortunately, due to reasons that are not really Kulve Taroth's fault at all, she's number 5 on this list.
Number 4, Kassala Daora.
Why, God? Why?
To think that Kassala Daora was one of the first Elder Dragons in the Monster Hunter series is really interesting to me, especially when you consider the others introduced alongside him. Teostra with his blasty shenanigans, even before they were necessarily considered blast, Chameleos, who was the father of invisibility and a main proprietor of poison, and even Lunastra, who at that point may have just been a blue Teostra, but these days has redeemed herself such a massive amount. So what makes Kassala take his place on this list? Well, there are two things for me, but they both stem from the same ideal. Wind. The wind aura around Kassala himself makes some sense in terms of lore, but when it comes to actually fighting him, results in nothing but frustration. If you are a melee user, you know what it feels like to be knocked out of a good hit on a Kassala without actually taking damage from anything. Hell, even ranged users experience it sometimes, and then he takes to the air, and even in the new world where we have all this range of motion between sliding in our many ledges, and hell, even wedge beetles in Kassala's case, but none of it matters. If Kassala's wind aura is up when he is flying and you are not a ranged weapon user, you get to do precisely fucking nothing. Because 9 times out of 10, an aerial strike will wind up with you getting sent on your ass back down to the floor looking like an idiot. Lore-wise, there has to be a wind aura of some sort. It would be ridiculous to not have one for a monster known as the Tempest of Wind, but it needs to be either less obtrusive or more noticeable. Sure, the easy fix is to just make it smaller so it's less of a frequent frustration, but there's an opportunity here to create an interesting fight. Instead of flinching you, imagine if the wind physically pushed you away from the Kassala, not interrupting your attack, but legitimately trying to push you out of your attacking range in the first place. This may not fix the frustration of the ability, but it would be a way better visualization of the idea of Kassala, at least to me, and it would make it much more interesting for the player to fight because you could still hit the Kassala if you went in at the right angle with the right attack. Past that, I think the biggest glaring issue here is that wind isn't an element.
Unacceptable!
Now, I'm not exactly sure what I would do with a wind element if it was a proper element other than the pushing itself that I've described for the aura, or maybe even just literally making Kassala's tornadoes cause bleed, but I feel like there has to be something. Wind being physical makes some sense, but it takes away a lot of the potential that I feel there is for a monster like Kassala, and Kassala not quite reaching the potential that a monster with his lore has is exactly the reason that he falls at number 4 on this list.
Number 3, Zoram Magdaros.
Man, I am kicking this rock's ass! Well, they're all dead. I guess I'll just relax for a bit.
What the?
Zora, oh Zora Magdaros. You are such a cool monster! Didn't you just call him the 3rd worst Elder Dragon? Look, okay, you try picking 5 bad Elder Dragons, though in this case, there is a large part of Zora Magdaros that you could label as straight up bad, and that is, well, his fight. The first time you fight Zora Magdaros, at least as someone who was fresh to Monster Hunter as a whole when I came into World, is an unforgettable experience, but the more that I see Zora and the more old world monsters I'm introduced to, the more I realize that Zora himself had very little to do with the feeling that I had. It was mostly because he was the biggest monster I'd ever seen, and the idea of fighting on his back was pretty cool. Unfortunately, what became clear through repeat hunts of this teenage mutant magma turtle is that it sort of isn't fun to just beat up glowing rocks on a monster's back. And while the barrier section of the fight is epic in theory, the cannon and ballista mechanics are just not interesting enough to carry a fight. So what you wind up with is a 10-minute section where you can beat up some non-moving rocks on his back, and in theory have to do some damage to an Elder Dragon, followed by another 10 minutes or so of cannon fire, ballista shots, and a Dragonator. And the biggest flaw in all of it is that your input barely matters. That's right, if you go AFK for 80% of the timer on this quest, there's still a decent chance you can finish it. Hell, you can literally make a sandwich when Nergigante lands on Zora's back and come back to find Nergi gone. Not having seen him in game once, not having to deal a single point of damage to him, he just leaves. Honestly, I could keep ranting for a while, but it would all just come back to these 2 points. So here they are. The fight's just not fun, and your input is almost completely unnecessary, and that is why Zora Magdaros is number 3 on this list.
Number 2, Lao Shan Lung.
Man, this one is actually one of the easiest placements on here for me, and maybe part of this is unfair because Lao Shan Lung is a first-generation monster and the games as a whole have advanced a massive amount since then, but tons of monsters have had changes and reworks over time, and Lao still remains, well, the same corridor fight. And not the action movie kind of corridor fight. Unfortunately for him, the main thing that Lao is going for him is really his size, except that there are so many larger monsters in this series now that he just sort of falls in with the pack in that regard. He doesn't really fight back a whole lot. Definitely less than a monster like Kulve, and arguably even less than a monster like Zoram, who I just talked about. Lao Shan Lung's impact on the series as the first big boy Elder Dragon is undeniable, and the precedent that it set for future monsters and the fact that he probably is the reason that we have all of the other giant monsters is undeniable. But unfortunately, that kind of context does not make his fight any more enjoyable. He just sort of walks along like a slug while you slowly chip away at his mammoth health pool. And again, I can imagine doing this the first time, playing a Monster Hunter game all the way back at the beginning, was at least a very surprising experience to fight a monster this massive, but it arguably wasn't even that much fun then, and he just hasn't aged well in comparison to all of the new monster talent coming up around him. And that is why Lao Shan Lung finds himself at number 2 on this list.
Number 1. Fatalis.
Come on.
Okay, now you're probably yelling at your screen right now, so here are some things to calm you down. Puppies, chocolate cookies, Dodogama.
I feel a lot better now.
Now that your immediate outrage has had time to take the back seat for a moment, let me explain what I mean.
Say the line, Bart.
Fatalis is the god of all monsters. In lore, Fatalis is the god of all monsters. In game, Fatalis is just sort of your classic dragon that could be a boss fight in pretty much any goddamn fantasy game. He just sort of walks around like a normal dragon, occasionally stands up on 2 feet, which is a little unusual to be completely fair, and then he just does relatively normal fire breaths and fireballs and some physical attacks. Sure, he's an imposing figure, don't get me wrong, but this is absolutely not the creature that tore down a castle because he felt like it. The dragon whose mere wing strokes make these strongest monsters run away in fear. I mean, Fatalis' armor sets literally cause hunters to go insane because of the tiny remnants of him that they still possess. And in theory, these weapons and armor pieces are, to an extent, still alive. Literally speaking, it is implied that Fatalis is immortal, defeatable, but he can never really fully die. Even in these tiny pieces, it's still sort of alive. His eyes are even made of crystals, for fuck's sake, and yet when you fight him, he's just a sort of normal dragon who does normal dragon things, and he is a wonderful normal dragon, but sometimes the thing that we have to judge a monster on is potential. Fatalis' potential based on his lore and concept are quite literally mind-blowing. He is capable of things that we could not imagine if we sat down and literally brainstormed it for days. But unfortunately, regular Fatalis will never quite live up to his lore. What does come a little bit closer, though, is white Fatalis, but then we have the interesting conundrum of why does regular Fatalis exist at all, as a fight at least, in a world with white Fatalis? Especially with the lore the way it is, fighting a less powerful Fatalis is like if Darth Vader was still a Padawan when he fought Luke in The Empire Strikes Back, and I just used a Star Wars reference to make a point about Monster Hunter, but it makes goddamn sense. But even then, if we are honest with ourselves, completely honest with ourselves, as much as white Fatalis is way stronger than regular Fatalis, he still doesn't quite live up to the legends. In fact, the closest to the legends that we get of a Fatalis is the white Fatalis in Frontier. This white Fatalis, I could actually believe is the one from some of the legends, and maybe over time the legends just got exaggerated to all hell like they are today, but I could actually believe that they were based off of the power of this white Fatalis. But this white Fatalis not only isn't even in the main series, but isn't even the same monster as Fatalis. White Fatalis counts as a different monster in the series than regular Fatalis, and therefore must be judged separately. And as far as this judgment goes, I find Fatalis lacking. Not in potential, but simply in execution, which unfortunately is why, in my opinion, Fatalis is the worst Elder Dragon in the Monster Hunter series. Alright everyone, I've been Cotton Dinosaur, and these have been my 5 worst Elder Dragons in Monster Hunter. Do you agree with my choices, or am I a big poo-poo face who insulted your favorite monster? Who do you think are the worst Elder Dragons? Like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. This is the brand new outro to tell you all the things that you do that we love. So let's start with something simple and say, oh, we love your eyes. When they're watching us play video games, when we make a bunch of jokes that are kinda lame, or when they gaze upon our failures as we try to kill the monsters or important news about the kingdom Animalia. Rage, Continent, Hollow, we're all here talking about the things you want to hear. So if you want to be the first to hear, like and subscribe and the bell and we'll cheer. Some of you are patrons even though we are all the noobs and you're the pros. There's nothing we can do to thank you. No, really, there's nothing we could possibly do. Goodbye.